Hello children, welcome to Story Time with Pip School System. Today we will be reading a story from the Oxford Reading Treasure called Akbar and the Crows. And the story we will be reading from it is The Pedlar of Swaffham. Now let's begin and you try and read with me. The Pedlar of Swaffham. There lived in former times, in the village of Swaffham, or Swaffham, in Norfolk, England, a man by the name of John Chapman. John was a simple man. He was also very poor. John earned his living as a peddler. His job was to carry a sack of wares from place to place, and to sell what he could, where he could, and when he could. It was not an easy job, especially when the weather was not pleasant. One particular winter, John carried his sack of goods to many towns and villages around Norfolk. He had been away from home for many weeks. The winter that year had been harsh indeed. There had been thick snow on the ground, and the blustery wind had been bitterly cold. One evening, after trudging from town to town for 2 long days, John returned to his humble cottage. He was exhausted and hungry. His feet felt sore, what with all the walking he had done. His undersized boots pinched his toes. His back ached from the weight of the heavy sack he had borne. It was weighty when he had set off from his home. It was weighty still, for the poor man had had little luck. He had sold so few of his wares. John sank into his chair in a heap. His dog whimpered and lay down on the floor beside his chair. John bent over and eased the boots off his swollen feet. He grimaced in agony. The faithful dog looked up at his master, and seeing his pain, began to lick John's feet tenderly. The animal could see how distressed John looked, and it felt sorry for him. John patted the dog's back and sighed. He would feed the dog, have a bowl of soup himself, if there was any food at all to be found in the house, and then go to bed. But first he would have to fetch some wood to light a fire. His small house was freezing, and the temperature would certainly drop much lower during the long night. John stood up with some difficulty. He hobbled along to the wood pile just outside the back door. The stone floor was so cold. He took up an armful of kindling and a few logs and hurried back to stand on the small rug in front of the fireplace. He put some of the kindling in the fireplace and lit a match. Very soon a fire was blazing away, and he was able to warm his hands and feet. After a while, he began to feel much better. When the dog had been fed, John set about making himself some soup. When it was ready, he took his bowl and settled back in his armchair by the fire. He sipped at the soup hungrily and wished that he had some bread to dip into it. Having almost burnt his lips in his eagerness to drink the hot soup, John wrapped himself in a warm blanket and curled up in front of the fire. It would be too cold to move into his small bedroom and get into an icy bed, he thought. And besides, the fire had warmed the sitting room nicely. So John decided to spend the night where he was. Soon, with his dog curled up beside him, the worn-out peddler was fast asleep and into the land of dreams. During the night, John did indeed have a number of dreams, but one in particular was most strange. He dreamed that he was standing on London Bridge, although he had never been to London, and there he heard some good news. When he woke up in the morning, he remembered the dream. "Fancy that," John said it to his dog. "If I go to London and stand on London Bridge, I shall hear some joyful news which will change my fortune. Ha! That's hard to believe." John had no plans to go to London. It was a long way off, and he was not going to walk all that way because of a dream. He had never been there in his life, nor did he intend going there now, and certainly not because he had had a dream. But he did wonder what the dream was all about. He had not had much luck selling anything recently, so he did not have much money. He wondered how he would get through the winter, how he would feed himself and his dog. Over the next few days, John did not go very far from home. He walked so much during the previous weeks that his boots were in tatters. He would have to buy a new pair soon. But with what? Then a very strange thing happened. One night, soon afterwards, John had the very same dream again. He was now very confused. In the morning, he said to his dog, "That's a funny thing. Do you think I should go to London and stand on London Bridge, waiting for some joyful news?" The dog did not answer. It looked up at him with its eyes like saucers, wagged its tail, and tried to lick his hand. John dismissed the dream from his mind, but when he had the same dream for the third time, he began to wonder whether there was indeed some message in it for him. He thought about the dream a great deal from then on. The following morning, he announced to his dog, "Come on, fella. What have I to lose? Let's go and see if there is any truth in this dream." So, though it was still very cold, and spring and London were a long way off, John and his dog set out on the road to the city. This time, unusually, he did not take his sack of wares with him. He could not say why. John and his dog trudged south towards London. They passed along strange and lonely paths and tracks, through the snow and the slush for 3 days. From time to time, kind people on the way felt sorry for the poor man and his dog and gave them scraps of food to eat. It was a long, hard journey. At last, quite exhausted, they reached the smoky city of London. John made his way directly to London Bridge. When John and his dog arrived at the bridge, they crossed to the middle and stood there, looking at the swirling green water of the Thames below. John waited patiently for 3 whole days to hear some joyful news. But who would give him this news? From where would the news come? What joy would this news bring him? These questions repeated themselves in his mind, and he had no idea about any of the answers. Standing on the bridge, in the mist and the drizzle, John appeared a pitiful sight. He seldom moved from the spot during his long wait for an answer. As John continued his lonely wait on the bridge, people came and went. They passed by him, but took no notice. They did not stop to inquire why he was waiting there. Then, from a shop close by, a shopkeeper who had noticed John standing on the bridge decided to find out about the stranger on the bridge. "I wonder why that poor man stands on the bridge each day," said the shopkeeper to himself. "He does not sell anything. He does not beg for alms. What can he be up to?" Out of curiosity, the shopkeeper left his shop and approached John. "Good day," said the shopkeeper as he drew close to John. John briefly looked up, greeted the shopkeeper with a nod, and turned to gaze once again at the murky river. "I have seen you standing here for 3 days," continued the shopkeeper. "May I ask what it is you wait for, and what is your business?" "My name is John Chapman," replied John. "I'm a peddler from Swaffham, but I have not brought any goods to sell. I had a dream in which I was told to come and stand on London Bridge, where I would hear some joyful news. So here I am, sir." As John turned his eyes to the river once more, the shopkeeper began to laugh heartily. "Why do you laugh, sir?" asked John, looking at the shopkeeper. "Do you mean to say you have come all this way to stand in the mist and the cold each day because of a dream?" asked the astonished shopkeeper. "Yes," replied John. "I would not be such a fool as you, country fellow," mocked the amused shopkeeper. "Last night I dreamed that I was at Swaffham, in Norfolk, a place completely unknown to me. I dreamed that behind a peddler's house, in a certain orchard, and under a great oak tree, there is a vast treasure. But I am not such a fool as to make a long journey because of a silly dream. No, no, friend, I am wiser than that." John listened to what the shopkeeper had to say, but gave no reply. He thought to himself, "Perhaps indeed I have been very foolish. Perhaps I should have stayed at home." The shopkeeper turned to leave, but before he went he said, "If I were you, good fellow, learn some sound sense from me. Go home. You will catch your death of cold on this bridge. You are wasting your time here." When the shopkeeper had gone, John thought some more about his words. He felt in his heart that the shopkeeper's advice was what he had dreamed about. Perhaps without knowing it, the shopkeeper had indeed given him joyful news. The peddler left immediately. He did not waste any time along the way, but hurried home. And as soon as he arrived at his cottage, he went and fetched a spade and began to dig the earth in his garden, under the great oak tree, just as the shopkeeper had stated. After digging for half an hour, John's spade struck something solid. It was not a rock. It was a pot of gold. A little later, he unearthed another pot of gold. John was delighted. With his lucky find, all because of a dream, John grew exceedingly rich. However, he did not keep all his riches for himself. He gave a great sum of money towards the repair of the church of St. Peter and St. Paul in Swaffham. And to this day, yes, it is true, there is a stone statue there which shows John with a pack on his back and his faithful dog at his heels. So, children, how did you like the story? Isn't it fun? Reading is fun. Practice reading at home with the correct pronunciation and tone. Practice daily and place your finger below the word while reading out loud. Also try to learn the spellings from the word list given at the back of the book. Take care.